We are still celebrating the new XLookup function, released few hours ago. The XLookup is different from VLookup in that it uses separate lookup and return arrays. It defaults to exact match and can extract from the right or left side of the lookup column. I'm Nabil Murad. In a previous tutorial, I showed you the basic functionality of the XLookup function. In this video, I'll show you how the XLookup can return an array instead of a single value, or it can return cell references for another function. And then, how can I nest multiple XLookup functions to replace the classic index and match? So let's see how we do that in Excel. Here is my start file. You can download the exercise file and follow along by clicking on the link below the video. In this worksheet, I have a list of names in column A, and then I have a certain amount corresponding to each name for each month of the year from January to December, from column B to column M. I also created a data validation list, a drop list, in cell P2. Whenever I select any name from the drop list, I would like to extract all the amounts corresponding to that name or to that record. I'm going to do it the classical way first by using the popular VLookup function, and then I'll be doing the same exact thing by using the function that has been just released few hours ago, the XLookup function. So I'll be typing equal VLookup, and then I hit tab. The VLookup function has 4 arguments. The first argument, the lookup value, what are you looking for? I'm looking for this name in cell P2, and because I have the intention to copying to the right, then I'm going to lock the column letter but not the row number, and I do that by hitting the F4 key 3 times. I hit comma to move to the next argument, and then what about the table array? The table array will be the entire table, so I select the top row, and then I hit Shift, Control, down arrow, and then I hit F4 to lock it because I'm copying to the right, and then I hit comma. Then it asks me about the column index number, which simply means from which column you need a return value. For this cell where I'm creating my function, I need a return value from the second column that corresponds to January. But as I copy to the right, I want that number to increment to become 3, 4, 5. And we have a popular function that we use when we want to increment while copying across the columns, and the name of the function is columns. And the columns function counts the difference between 2 cell references you select. So if I type columns, and then I hit tab, and then I select any 2 adjacent cells. You can select any cell you like. I'm selecting 2 cells in column N and O. So if you count N3, O3, that's 2 columns. I'm going to close the bracket, and because I want it to increment, then I'm going to put my blinking cursor in the first reference, and I lock it by hitting F4. So when I drag to the right, that will create an incremental number. Remember, I'm still in the third argument of the VLookup function, the column index number. I hit comma, and the last argument, are you looking at an exact match or an approximate match? I'm going to select false, which is exact match. Alternatively, you can type 0. I close the bracket, and when I hit enter, I was able to extract the amount for January corresponding to the zip, which is the name selected. I can copy this function to the right, so I hover over the lower right corner, the autofill handle, and I drag it all the way to December, and I was able to extract an entire record. Let me test. I go to my drop list, and I'm going to select a different name. Let it be this one, and as you can see, I have a conditional formatting set in the original list, so I see that my VLookup function is working just fine. But because this tutorial is comparing between the classic VLookup function and the new XLookup function, I want to delete this function and use the new XLookup function. The XLookup function was released on the 28th of August 2019 at noon. So let's see how we use the XLookup function. It has 5 arguments. 3 of them are mandatory arguments, 2 optional arguments, and it's way more powerful than the VLookup function. In order to prepare for using my XLookup function, I would like to name this entire range. So I'm going to select all the names starting from A1 down to the end, Shift Control down arrow to select the entire range. And I want to tell Excel, would you please name this range by using the top row So I use the shortcut Control-Shift-F3, and it opens the dialog box, create name from selection. All what you need to do is to hit OK, because top row is already selected and I would have created a name. If you check by clicking on the name box, you will find that name has been assigned to this range. Now let's create our XLookup function. Equal XLookup, and then I hit tab. It asks me about the lookup value. The lookup value is the name coming from cell P2. Remember, in the VLookup function I had to lock the column letter. I'm not going to do that here. I hit comma, and then it asks me about the lookup array, which means where are you looking for this value. I already assigned a name, and I call the range name. So I'm going to select name, and then I hit tab, and then I hit comma, and look at the return array. We do not have a column index number for this function. I have a return array, and because I want this function to spell an entire array of values, so I'm going to select all the numbers starting with the top row, Shift Control down arrow. I don't want to lock, so I want to jump back to the top. I'm not going to hit F4. I'm going to hit Control backspace to jump back to the top without locking. And look what happens when I hit Enter. It extracts the entire record. Let me check how dynamic it is. So when I click on the down arrow, and let's say I select a different name, well, you can see that it extracts the entire record, although I created a single function. Like all dynamic array functions, the function lives in the cell in which I created it. And if you look at the formula bar, it's black in color. And if you select any other cell where the function spells, you will see that it's grayed out. If you have any obstacle or any value in the way, it will be returning a spell error. That was my first example in which I used the XLookup function to return an array of values. Now let's see another example where I'll be using the XLookup function to return cell references to be used by another function. I'm going to switch to my next worksheet, cell reference, and it's the same exact setup. So I would like to start by naming the entire range of names in column A. I select the top value, Shift Control down arrow, and then I want to name it, so I hit Control-Shift-F3, create names from selection, and then I hit OK, and I would have named this entire range. What I would like to do this time is to select a name from a drop list, and when I select any name, this time I want to add up all the amounts corresponding to that name from January to December, as if I'm selecting all these numbers, and when I look to the lower right side of my status bar, I see an amount. This is exactly what I want to do, but I want it to be dynamic, so when I change from the drop list, I get a different total. I have conditional formatting set in my list, so when I change the name, I'll be getting a different highlighting in my list. Let's see how we do that by using the sum function, equal sum. And then I hit tab. The record I'm selecting is in row number 10. If I was to type the cell reference, I would say I would like to sum from B10 to M10, and that will give me the result. As simple as that. But I want it to be dynamic, so I want to return cell references. So I'm going to combine two XLookup functions. Each one of them will be returning the corresponding cell reference. Let's see how we do that. First, XLookup function, XLookup, and then I hit tab. What are you looking for? I'm looking for this name. This is my lookup value. And then I hit comma. Where do you look for it? Well, I named the range. I named it client. So I type client, and then I hit tab, and then I hit comma. What would you like to return? In this case, I would like to return a cell reference for the month of January, the leftmost. That will be the starting cell reference. So my range will be the entire range, starting from the first value in January. Shift Control down arrow. We don't want to lock, so I hit Control backspace. And then I close the bracket. This XLookup function will be extracting the starting cell reference and provide it to my sum function. I'll show you that in a moment. But for now, let's create the second function that will return the ending cell reference. So I type a colon, and here is the second XLookup function. XLookup, what are you looking for? I'm looking for this name, comma, in the range named client, and then I hit tab, comma, what's your return array? We don't have a column index number in this function, so I'm selecting the first value under December, Shift Control down arrow, Control backspace as I did before. I close the bracket for the XLookup function and close the bracket for the sum function. The first XLookup will be returning the starting cell reference. The second XLookup will be returning the ending cell reference. When I hit enter, here is the total amount. Let's confirm. I'm going to select all these highlighted numbers, and when I look down here, it's the same exact amount, so my function is working just fine. Let's test how dynamic it is. I'm going to change and select a different name. Let's select this name here, and it's dynamic and it's returning the total sales for the selected client. But what's happening behind the scene? I want to see what's happening. On the Formulas tab, I'm going to use the Evaluate Formula. That will take me to a tour behind the scene. It will show me what's happening there and how Excel is processing this function. You can use the shortcut Alt-TUF, and here is the Evaluate Formula. P2 is underlined, so when I hit Evaluate, Excel is replacing P2 by its value. So I'm going to hit Evaluate 3 times, and look at that. It's returning B4, which is the first cell reference. Let's hit Evaluate 3 times to process the second XLookup function, and here you go. As if I'm summing from B4 to M4, the XLookup function is returning a cell reference to the sum function. Let's close, and the XLookup function can be used for returning a cell reference. Let's see the next example. I have the same exact list. Let's go right away and define a name to the managers in column A. Shift Control down arrow, Control Shift F3 as I did before, and then when I hit OK, I would have named the entire range managers following the top row. I created 2 drop lists in my setup, and I want, whenever I select a name from the left drop list and select a month from the upper drop list, this time I would like to extract the intersection of the two. I'm going to do that with the classic way first, the index and match function. But hold on a second. The match function has been in Excel for a very long time. On the 28th of August 2019, Microsoft released a new match function, a modification of the match function, and it's easier to use. It's called the XMatch. What's the advantage of the XMatch? It requires only 2 arguments, because by default it returns an exact match. Let me show you how am I going to do that, and how am I going to use the amazing XLookup function and nest it in another XLookup function to perform the same goal. Let's go the classic way. I want to extract a number, so I'll be using an index function, equal index, and then I hit tab. It asks me for an array. I want to return a number from this range. I'm selecting the top row, Shift Control down arrow, and then I want to jump back to the top. Whether you lock or not, it makes no difference because we are not copying, so I hit F4 to lock it and jump back to the top. And then I hit comma. Now the index function requires a row number, and I'm going to extract this row number by using a match function. But instead of using the classical match function and provide 3 arguments, I'm going to use the new one, XMatch. And then I hit tab. Here is my XMatch function. What's your lookup value for the row? I have to look at the name. So I'm clicking on the name in cell P2, and then I hit comma. And where is your lookup array? We already named it manager, so I'm going to type manager, and then I hit tab. When I close the bracket, this part will return a number. That will be the row number provided to the index function. I also need a column number to get the number at the intersection. So I hit comma, and then I'll be using another XMatch function, XMatch, and then I hit tab. What's your lookup value this time for the column? It will be the month, and then I hit comma. Where do you look for it? I look for it in row number 1, and then when I close the bracket for the second XMatch, I close the bracket for the index function. When I hit enter, that will be the number corresponding to the name I selected. The conditional formatting I have right now is related to the second drop list, so let me unify the second drop list and select the same exact name. So if I go up at the top a little bit and select the same exact name, here is the name. When I select it, that's the amount returned, and that's wonderful. Now let's do it with a nested XLookup function. When I select May, then I need to extract a value from this entire column, column F, which had the numbers for May. But if I change it to any other month, so let's say I have January, then I want to extract from column B. When I have December, I need to extract from column M. I want to do this part first, which extract the entire column, and I'm going to do it here to the side. So what if I would like to extract an entire column of numbers? So I type equal XLookup, and then I hit tab. What are you looking for? Because I want to extract an entire column for all the numbers corresponding to May. Then I click on May. And then I hit comma. Where do you look for it? I'm looking for it in this entire range. That's my lookup array. And then I hit comma. Okay, what's your return array? That's the third argument of the XLookup function. And look what happens when I select all the numbers. Shift Control down arrow, Control backspace to jump back to the top without having to lock. Let me show you my function. A very simple function. I can even move the screen tip away. And now look at this. This is my very simple function. When I hit enter, it extracts all the numbers corresponding to the selected month. Is it dynamic? Definitely it is. So if I change the month, and let's say instead of May, I'll be selecting December. When I select December, look at that. It's extracting all the numbers corresponding to December. This XLookup function will be used inside another XLookup function. Remember, it returns the entire column of numbers corresponding to the selected month. I'm going to switch back to May just to compare it to the result of the upper function. Before I do, to make my life easier and yours as well, I'm going to select the dynamic array function that I created. As you can see, it lives in the top cell, and if you select any other cell, the function is grayed out in the formula bar. I'm selecting the top cell, and I'll be copying this function without the equal sign, Control C, and then I hit escape. Now I have it in the Office clipboard. I start creating my main XLookup function that will extract the number at the intersection, equal XLookup. And then when I hit tab, I see the lookup value. This time I'm looking at the name. My lookup value will be the name coming from the drop list. I hit comma. What's your lookup array? My lookup array will be all the names in column A, and because I named it, I'm going to type manager, and then I hit tab, comma. What's your return array? My return array will be the entire column corresponding to the month. This is what we just did with the first XLookup function. So I'm going to paste it here. And when I close the bracket and hit enter, it will be extracting the number at the intersection of the selected name and the selected month. Let's close the bracket and hit enter, and here you go. I have conditional formatting applied, so if I change the name and select a different name, I'm going to change the month as well and select a totally different month. The calculation is dynamic, and you see the same exact number highlighted by the conditional formatting. I want to give you a bonus tip as well, how to use the XLookup function for returning an approximate match. So I'm going to click on the next worksheet, approximate, and here I have an income tax table, and this income tax is showing different brackets of income and the corresponding tax amount that I should be paying based upon my income. In cell E2, I would like to use a VLookup function that looks at my income in cell D2 and accordingly returns the corresponding amount. I'm going to do that first by using the classic VLookup function, equal VLookup, and then I hit tab. What's your lookup value? My lookup value will be the income amount. I hit comma. Where is your table array? My table array will be all this entire table, and then I hit comma. What's the column index number? I need to extract a value from the second column, so I type 2, and then here I hit comma. Are you looking at an exact match or an approximate match? So if you type exact in this situation, this number isn't in the list. It's somewhere between two brackets. So you definitely have to go with an approximate match. Otherwise, you will get a not available error. So I'm going to select true, which is approximate, and then I close the bracket. When I hit enter, it's returning the $60. If this is my income, which falls between the 2 and 5,000 bracket, then it jumps back to the first bracket. But sometimes, if it's somewhere between the two brackets, the regulation said you have to round it up to the next bracket. And the XLookup function will give me these options. Let's first return the same result by using the XLookup function. So I type equal XLookup, and then I hit tab. What's your lookup value? My lookup value will be the income. So I click on cell D5, and then I hit comma. What's the lookup array? Where do you look for it? Where I look for it in this lookup array. And remember, we don't have that number here because it's somewhere between two brackets, but the XLookup function can handle a situation with an approximate match. I hit comma, and here it asks me from which column would you like to get a return value. I want to get a return value. My return array will be the numbers in column B. And look at the next argument when I hit comma. Now it asks me, do you want an exact match? 0. That's the default. Definitely I don't want that, but for the approximate match I have two options. Would you like -1, which is exact match, or the next smaller item, or the next larger item? I'll go with -1 for now. -1, and then I hit comma. -1 is the next smaller. Would you like to search from first to last or from last to first? I'll accept the default, which is 1, search from first to last, just to simulate the VLookup function. When I close the bracket and then hit enter, it's returning the same amount. What if I go back, put my function in the edit mode, F2, and edit the force argument? I'm going to click somewhere in my function and select the match mode, which is the force argument. I would like to change this one to 1. 1 simply means the next larger item. And then I hit enter. It's extracting the next larger value, 110. So in this tutorial, I showed you different situations where we can use the XLookup function either to return an array of values, or I can use it for returning cell references to be used by another function, or we can use it and nest it inside another XLookup function to get the intersection of a column and a row. And as a bonus tip, I showed you the XLookup function when used with an approximate match. If you enjoyed this training video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel to be notified when new tutorials are released. The best is yet to come. Thank you for watching and see you next time.